Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to special call working session of the board for July 8th, 2019. We're going to hear a presentation on the fiscal year 2020 proposed budget.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we're going to jump right in, kind of take care of some administrative duties here first. We did have our advertisement in the MDJ on July 1, and we actually had a follow-up on July 2nd. We just want to make sure we met the minimum requirements for the millage piece of that, but we do have our first public hearing tomorrow morning, and this will be for the budget, but we will also be having a public hearing for the millage as well. Our second public hearing for both the millage and the budget will be on July 16th, and this is a special called meeting at 6:30. Our normal meetings are at 7, so just please take note of that time. And our third and final public hearing and adoption will be on July 23rd at the regularly scheduled night meeting for July. Okay. All right, so we just want to kind of touch base on some of the highlights or major assumptions going into the FY20 budget. We're assuming a flat millage rate. And that's what was advertised. We do anticipate a digest growth, so we're looking at a 3.4% growth, which is the net growth. Just to kind of give you an idea, we're roughly at 4.8 net this year, so it kind of gives you an idea. We're going to make sure we try to always miss on the low side, and to put that number together, we do work closely with the tax assessor's office. And then also in the FY20 budget, we're looking at reducing the water transfer from 10% to 9%. And then we are looking also, or we will be doing an additional increase to undesignated capital. This is our capital replacement plan. So when I get to capital later, I'll kind of walk through this. But in the FY19 budget, we did approximately 1.5. So we're looking to increase that to just right about $3 million for FY20. And then we are going to be eliminating the senior membership fees. And if you remember, the board approved a monthly or yearly membership for senior services last year. And the county residents paid $60 for 12 months, and non-county residents were paying $90. So effective October 1, we are going to discontinue that for county residents, and there's going to be some further discussion about how we proceed with that, but we're working through those details now. Willie Tanks and his team met with me and Commissioner Gambrell, and we kind of walked through some of those, but they're going to be giving some further information as we move forward. And then we're also looking to eliminate the funding for the not-for-profits. If you remember, in FY19 was the year we funded roughly $850,000 for nonprofits.
Okay, Bill?
Yes, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I know we agreed to eliminate the membership fee.
Yes, ma'am.
But are we still going to charge out of county a membership fee, or just increased rates on the classes?
That is one of the details they're working out now to find out what best would work in the facilities. So they're going to bring a proposal back or that recommendation back to the board to discuss those facts. Because they've looked at it both ways, whether we continue to charge a membership fee for out-of-county residents or just an increased class fee. So they're looking at it both ways, trying to determine which would be the most effective approach, because they do have out-of-county residents that use the facilities but maybe not take classes, so they're trying to weigh those pros and cons. So they will be bringing that back before the Board of Commissioners to consider.
Okay.
But the only...
I would say both.
Okay, Commissioner Gambrell?
And Commissioner Burrell, as Bill stated, that is something that we are considering. One of the things we're doing is looking at how the Parks Department does it, because for out-of-county residents, they usually pay an increased user fee. So that's one of the things that they'll be evaluating going forward.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and with all of our budget presentations, we always identify any new positions or any position reclasses. So on this page, I just want to give you an overview. We're looking at creating 20 full-time positions within the county with this adopted FY20 budget. 12 of those will be in the general fund. So you can walk down the list, you see 2 investigators. We have some positions related to magistrate court. Now, this was part of an internal audit process through the magistrate court's office, and we worked very closely with Judge Holmes at the time to go through this, as well as internal audit. So these are directly coming from the recommendations of the internal audit review that was done. And then we're also looking to do building maintenance tech for police. This is for the training center and headquarters at this time. These will be coming online at the very end of FY20. So, I'm sorry. No, we're doing one right now, but when both facilities come online, then we'll be looking to add a second one. So because we're looking to move into these probably August timeframe is, I think when I talked to Eddie, there's only going to be a short overlap in FY20. And then when 21, you'll be looking to add another one of these. So there will be one for each facility. Okay.
Commissioner Gamble?
And then, as discussed in the work session this morning, I don't see the medical examiner on here for their 2 positions. Is that going to be included as well?
We have, those positions already created, so this wouldn't be part of the creation of positions, but the funding of those 2 positions would change. So that isn't something that we've addressed in this slide, but if there's something you'd like us to include in the future, we can, because the funding definitely would change from grant funded to general fund. And the general fund general fund does have those included in the FY20 budget, assuming that they're going to take over from the grant funding that's in place today.
So since these were originally grant funds, they're not considered new positions?
That's correct. The position's created, but we have that in there assuming or anticipating the vote on that item for tomorrow. Now, if that vote changes, we will have to make a modification to the budget and to reflect the vote. So we just want to show you a conservative estimate now, but again, it does hinge on the vote tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And then we have, you see some probate court. We're looking at a staff attorney, 2 administrative specialists, and then we have a delete and add for information services. And this is deleting a full-time or a part-time position and creating a full-time. And this, they did look at outsourcing this, and they found it to be much more cost-effective to eliminate the part-time and not have any outsourcing and have it more supported by a full-time staff member. Okay. And then some of our other funds that we have, so we have 911, we're looking at a 911 operations supervisor, and then we have several utility workers for water, 7 positions in total, as well as an environmental compliance inspector and an engineer. So that's all the positions we're looking to add in FY20. And then we do have some reclasses. So we do have a grants development specialist, grade 19, that is currently budgeted in ComDev in FY19. That is going to be moving to finance in FY20. And then we have a few personnel reclassifications for water, techs moving from 1 to 2, and then process control analyst 2 moving to, and you can see the grade change from 18 to 19. So that completes all of the personnel changes that we are anticipating for FY20. Okay, and then this is a high-level overview of the general fund. This is our primary operating fund within the county. You can see what we adopted in FY19, $454 million, and the proposed increase, our proposed budget for FY20 is $475 million, just under a 5% increase. And we're going to kind of walk down this, and this is something that Chairman asked us to put together, and I was a little surprised by the results. The percentages between desired, mandated, and essential are exactly the same as they were for FY19. So all the changes that we're proposing, the categories and the percentages are identical. Now the dollar amounts obviously fluctuate because we increased them, but percentage overall of 100% within the general fund, those are all exactly the same as they were for FY19. Okay. So this is going to break down some of the revenues that we have for the general fund, property taxes being the biggest component. You'll see this is up 6.37%. A big chunk of this, or a chunk of this, is going to be from digest growth. But with that, you're also seeing the way the state changed the allocation for our TAVTs, our title ad valorem. The county receives a much larger share than we have in the past. We had talked about that a few years ago. We were seeing that revenue source decline. The change that the state made increased the county's allocation, and we're seeing those being restored. So this is, just to give you an idea, over $4 million of this increase comes from the title ad valorem tax. So that is a pretty good plus up for us. Most of the other revenue categories are pretty flat, but going down to other taxes, you'll see that there's it's about a $2 million increase there. This is from our insurance premium taxes that we receive. And then as you go down, license and permits is relatively flat. Intergovernmental, same thing. Charges for services, about the same thing. Fines and forfeitures continue to decline as we've kind of watched those. This does not include the stop arm or the school bus stop arm fees because those are not adopted. Those are appropriated as received. But one of the things I want to call to your attention, this was kind of a change in how finance handles this through the adoption process and some practices that we put in place. If you look at other financing sources and uses, most of this is interest revenue. So in 2019, we adopted $213,000. We increased that to over $1.3 million because the way we can invest the funds putting those dollars to work for the county. The rates did improve, which allow us to get some more dollars there. So by having those reserves in place, those are going to translate to interest earnings that we can generate. Transfers in are relatively the same. However, like we said, we are decreasing the water transfer from 10 to 9, but those fluctuate, and we'll kind of go through some of those. A lot of those that are coming in, with the exception of the water transfer, are to fund the stadium bond debt service, and we'll walk through a slide that's specifically dedicated to that. All right. Okay. And then here's a quick overview of the expenditures, high-level categories, of course. One of the big line items that you see is an increase of 13%, 13.38% is operating. Most of this is due to inmate medical. It's a $5 million increase. This is a contract that we currently have with Wellstar that is going to be going out for RFP. This is anticipated increases that we've received to date. So $5 million of that increase is inmate medical. So that just kind of give you an idea. And then, Commissioner, I think Commissioner Burrow, you asked how we went from 3 to 8. That's how we went from 3 to 8. When we gave the initial, this is our increases, the breakdown, the 3 to 8 is that roughly $5 million for inmate medical. So we will be providing a detailed list, updated list for you all to consider just for review in case you have any questions. And we're also going to be providing you a copy of a more detailed version of this breakdown. So you're going to see for every department, personnel, operating, capital, debt service, transfers, contingency. So you'll have that breakdown year over year for your review. And then as we go through transfers out, a lot of this is going to fund capital within our 380 funds, the ongoing capital for IS and things of that nature, and then the contingency. So we're going to talk about this because in our one-pager that we handed out initially, we talked about a $10 million reduction. If you look at this, it looks like it's a $4 million increase. I'm going to walk you through how we calculated that. So we're going to have last year's slide and this year's, so you can take a look at how we got there. So I apologize, I couldn't figure out a better way to make this stand out for everybody, but the yellow items are all items that we show as reductions. So I'm going to go from bottom to top here. Veterans Memorial. Okay, this is a one-time payment. We had it as a contingency in FY19. We anticipate that being paid out or a decision made on that as we move forward. And so that will not be in there in 20. We added positions for parks and we had it in salary contingency. Those are now part of their personnel budgets because those positions have been filled. Accountability courts, $500,000, same thing. We're funding the accountability courts. Now it's part of their personnel and operating budget, so it's no longer in contingency. Library partial restoration, same thing. It was in contingency in 19. Now it's part of their personnel and operating budgets. Okay. Public safety shift differential and education pay. Education pay, while talking with public safety, we've moved that into their personnel budget, so you'll see a reduction in that. And then lastly, the biggest item on there is the $8 million. So that was part of the $15 million plus up that we did for public safety, 7.5 for sheriff, 7.5 for PD. And what we did is we loaded it in contingency, and they were allowed to basically bring back a plan of how they wanted to spend that. The PDs, a lot of theirs was for we had it for staff, and then we had it for some body cameras as well. Mm-hmm. And then sheriff, theirs moved for some capital replacement needs as well, some salary adjustments that they had to take that took place. But most of that went to inmate medical.
Excuse me, Bill.
Yes, ma'am.
So some of these will have a commensurate increase in the general fund, and then some of these are one-time expenditures. How would we know from looking at this?
Sure. The only one that is a one-time expenditure that I've highlighted in yellow is the Veterans Memorial. Okay. Everything else would flow up into the personnel and operating budgets. The items that are not highlighted in yellow, these are ones that will be on there again for 20, and I'll show you the slide in 20. These are reoccurring contingencies that we restore every year.
Okay, so then the body cameras, I would presume that's a one-time expenditure.
So the body cameras is actually, we're doing a finance process with them. So
okay.
Rather than a one-time out, you're going to see a payment, and they've adjusted their contingency accordingly. So they have $3 million here. You'll see when I get to the slide 20 that is down to $2 million because they're using $1 million a year to finance the body cameras,
okay.
and they're going to leave $2 million in contingency for replacements and other items, other capital replacement needs.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then here's a clean shot of 20. So the top two items would be new to the list, but this is part of what we talked about for looking at employee compensation. You're looking at 4% merit or cost of living for, merit for non-certified, non-sworn employees. And then we're looking at a 7% merit for certified and sworn employees. And now that is broken down a little bit differently. So I want to explain that. So we're doing a 4% adjustment to the pay grades within public safety. So one of the concerns that we heard this year was the entry level for a police officer, fireman, sheriff is too low. And by doing a 4%, we're raising that bottom, the midpoint, the bottom, or the bottom, the midpoint, and the top for those positions by 4%. And then they're going to have a 3% merit above and beyond that. So that way, when you're having, the PD officer 1 come in and go through training, they're not going to be at the lower level that we have today. You're going to see that at a 4% higher step. And then what we're doing within that 4% adjustment is you're going to get adjusted within your grade. So that way, if the officer who's been on the street for a year is not going to be making the same as the officer coming in day 1. So they'll be 4% higher and so on and so forth. And then they'll also be eligible for the 3% merit above and beyond that. It's a little confusing, sorry.
It's okay. And it's been explained to us, but I can certainly understand the general public not knowing that difference. We've had some discussion today about certified and sworn employees.
Mm-hmm.
Does this aptly capture all the employees considered certified and sworn, or are we going to have to go back and adjust based off of adjustments we're making today?
So that's a great question. So the initial premise that we are operating under the budget is based on the initial draft that we had when we did the certified. So we're talking strictly PD, sheriff, and fire. Now, based on the conversation that took place today, that could be a conversation. You're talking a small population in those other departments that could be adjusted for this. And the easy adjustment that we would need to make would basically, we could reduce the board's undesignated contingency to accommodate that if that was something we wanted to look at, or make another adjustment. So this is just the starting point for the discussion. But yes, these numbers, every year I've done this, every year I've seen this, the numbers that we present today will be slightly different by the time we get to adoption. So this is just to kick off the discussion, and we're open to your comments and suggestions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
The total, I'm sorry, will you finish?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
What, the total amount for the DA's office and solicitor general sworn?
We'll look at what the total amount for them would be for the 7%, but I know the agenda item that we had for discussion on this morning, it was roughly $41,000 for the one-time pay. But obviously, we can run the numbers for you if that's something that you'd like to see for the 7%. So it's only going to be it won't be a big number because we're going from 4 to 7. So it's not, but we can provide those to you for your.
Yeah, I'd like to know the total number.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I
Yeah.
support it. I just want to know.
Sure. Sure. And I think we're looking at 28 positions in total, so we can get you that. Absolutely. Okay.
But while you're talking 28 positions for that agenda item that was discussed this morning, there's more than 28 that we haven't considered.
If you include 9/11, 911 people. We're only talking about certified. That's the discussion. Let's make sure we stay within those boundaries. These are certified positions in public safety.
Certified and sworn.
That's correct.
Okay.
So it's beyond the 28 that Bill's,
It could be, you're right. If we involve 911 and we consider them fitting the definition, you're absolutely right. It could be that.
Okay.
But we haven't agreed on that yet.
So I will just look for a direction from the board of what you'd like us to provide, and we'll be happy to provide it at the end of the day. So, okay. All right, and then as you go down the rest of the list is going to be the same as last year's. So we're looking at, we talked about when you get down to police operating contingency, that's the remainder of the $3 million. And then everything else below that is a continuation of previous year. You're looking at the $1 million from the board undesignated contingency, the shift differential. Last year we had shift differential and education pay. Education pay moved into the personnel, but everything else will be the same, storm debris. But then you get down to the employee morale, welfare, and recreation. And Chairman, I was told that the MWR was a military term that you'd be familiar with.
It had nothing to do with that term.
No, you did not, but I was told you'd be familiar with it. So that is a new item that we have on the list. When we initially talked, there was some discussion about having money as a board for the individual districts. That has been moved up to this line here, so it could still be used for designated purposes, but this would be some further discussion. And then we have sick leave buyback, which is a continuation of previous years. holiday pay, and the 1/3 of the remaining stadium infrastructure is our final payment. If you remember, we agreed to pay that one-third every year for 3 years. This will be the final payment of those monies. And then we have a new item for succession planning, excuse me, and contingency. So this is $120,000 that would be used for that purpose. And then the county manager's contingency is a reoccurring contingency, just like the board's contingency, but that is at $30,000. Sorry, Commissioner.
It's okay. You can help me understand the shift differential.
Sure.
In a prior slide, it shared that the shift differential in education pay would be absorbed in the
So-
budget of the department.
We moved the education pay up to their personnel budget,
Okay.
and the shift differential in education pay refresh every year because we never know exactly how much that's going to pay out. So in the past, we've moved it on an as-needed basis, and what we've found in the last couple of years of doing that the education pay is a little bit easier to measure and project out. So we went ahead and moved that up to their personnel budget, where shift differential kind of can move a little bit more. So we leave that in contingency, and then as needed, we'll move it up to their personnel. But we would always going to have to refresh that every year because that's
Okay.
going to be a continuation. It's a
Okay.
pay incentive for public safety.
Okay.
Okay.
Could
Any
you
other-
explain this succession planning contingency to me?
Okay. So this is.
What do we buy for 120,000?
So that's one of the reasons we leave it in contingency, because when I say that is that we're not going to bring, and Rob, you're going to have to keep me honest here. The reason we didn't want to load this into training in departmental budgets is because we wanted to make sure that all these were approved specifically by the county manager. So if a department has a succession planning training opportunity for an individual, I believe they're going to go to the county manager for his approval and sign off versus having it in individual departments' budgets.
I understand.
That way it's more transparent and accountable, and the board can see that versus loading, $10,000 in my budget or so-and-so's budget to do with whatever. You're going to see exactly what it's for.
Okay.
And Chairman, the other thing is, right now, we are contemplating a partnership similar to the successful Excel program that we have had with the University of Georgia and the Carl Vinson Institute. We anticipate an expense in another relationship with the Carl Vinson Institute as it relates to the succession planning.
Okay, all right.
Perfect. All right, this is always our interesting slide that a lot of people are very curious about. So I just want to give you an idea. If you skip to the second line from the bottom, you'll see the general fund, what we have budgeted for the general fund's portion of the stadium bonds is 22.6%. To give you an idea of what we budgeted for 19, it was 24.6. So we're still seeing this come down. And one of the reasons that I want to let you know that is we're seeing growth in CSSD2, hotel motel tax, as well as we're seeing slight growth in the rental car tax, but that's relatively flat. One of the biggest changes on this slide is if you look at the transfer from CSSD1, that's the $3 a room night fee. If you remember last year, we approved an agreement with Cobb Travel and Tourism to provide them additional funding. And we're doing that. So in FY19, they received just over $600,000. In FY20, they're budgeted to receive $1.5 million. Even with that, because we walked through those, we're able to reduce the general fund's impact because of the growth in CSSD2 and the hotel motel tax. So we are still chipping away at the general fund portion of this. And these, I will say, these are generally conservative numbers. We budgeted 24.6% last year. We did beat that. So we're going to continue to monitor these as we move forward, but we don't want to overshoot this and have the general fund come up short. So that's just to give you an idea. We are still budgeting a decrease in the general fund's portion of this debt service payment.
Has the general fund portion, the property tax, has that always been $5 million?
No, initially it was 6.4 is
That's
what
what I
we
thought.
talked about when if you remember the
Right.
Braves fax with the little baseball on it, it
Right.
was 6.4 out of the gate.
Right,
And we've been able to continue to reduce that.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So that reduction is based off of a schedule of the bond payment, subtracting all the other inputs into this above the total other sources of revenue line? How
So-
are we determining?
Okay, so I'll walk you through how we'll work through that. So the stadium bonds is the schedule. So it's our debt service schedule that we have to meet.
Okay,
One of the fixed contributions that we will have is the Braves contribution of $6.1 million. That is the only fixed contribution that we have on this. All the other ones will fluctuate, grow, and change.
Okay,
So with that being said, CSSD2 is property tax driven, so as the digest grows,
Yeah.
and that contributes additional dollars.
okay,
As travel and tourism increases, you have additional hotel motel dollars that will go. And same thing with CSSD1, you get $3 a room, or $3 room night fee from CSSD1, but we're allocating those monies a little bit differently. If you remember last year, the board approved funding for public safety in and around the development.
Yeah.
So we're just allocating those, but the goal has always been to continue to reduce the general fund's piece of this pie.
okay, so in keeping in line with the stadium bond schedule, so that will be that max number,
Yes,
then we'll subtract all these other
Ye-
revenue sources, and then that will determine the general fund contribution each year.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Okay. All right, and then this is our high-level overview of the remaining funds. We spent a lot of time on the general fund already. A couple of the funds that I want to call to your attention, we always highlight these a little bit, that include appropriations of fund balance or general fund subsidy. So just kind of going down the list, the first one that you'll see is 911. This will be the second year in a row where we've appropriated fund balance to balance the budget. And when I say that is, if you know the $1.50 fee that we collect for the 911 is simply just not enough to support the operations that we have today. So unlike property taxes where the digest grows, it was. Well, even with the state collections, we were looking at this last year. So last year, before the state took it over, we were still watching this very closely. We still had to use over $1 million of fund balance to appropriate this. Now we're looking at the collections for the state, and they're really not affecting us dramatically in a negative way. So even if we had kept these in-house at $1.50, now they are slower coming in, but when you look at the month over month, when you line up, March collections with March collections, they're pretty similar. Now,
But for years, we didn't charge the full 150.
correct,
Which we were allowed to. We were at 125.
right,
And just in the last 2 years or so, we went to the 150.
right.
And then the state took it over, and we don't see it till much later in the year.
We don't. But even, like I said, even in 19, before the state took it over, we were looking at this, and it was still simply with $1.50 as being your ceiling, it is not enough to support the operation. So you're continuing to eat away at fund balance every year that we're doing this. So this is something to keep an eye on as we go forward, because at some point, either we're going to have to be able to have the authority to raise that fee, or you make an operational change, or you're looking at a general fund subsidy. So this is something as a long-term thing that we need to watch as we move forward. And it's not any tremendous growth in the 911 operations from personnel or operating or capital or anything along those lines. It's simply a steady growth between fringe benefits and things of that nature. Operation costs have steadily gone up, but that can be said with any operations within the county. So, but the fact that that fee is capped makes this a unique challenge. All right, and then we're going to jump down to the parking deck fund. So this still receives.
Hold on.
Yep, sorry.
Keep going down.
All right.
Why are you going down there?
I was going to hit anyone that had the asterisks or the.
All right, well,
so-
there's some other questions before we
Okay.
get to that.
All right.
Like, for instance, on fire,
Yes, sir.
that delta is covered by the fire fund?
Yes, sir. This is no fund balance appropriation. This
Okay.
is covered by the fire fund.
All right, and the hotel motel tax?
Okay, that is the countywide hotel motel tax, and again, that is used to fund the stadium bond debt service.
Oh, I see.
So that comes into us, and if you remember, the Galleria gets a big portion of that. We get the remaining share, and then we use that, the county's
Yeah.
share to fund the debt service.
If you would put in there, something that this is how we're paying for our portion of the Braves
Sure.
requirement, I think that would help the taxpayer
I
when he
will-
sees that.
I will add that because that'll be on the hotel motel tax, CSSD1 and CSSD2. So those are direct sources to fund
Okay.
the stadium debt service.
All right, now you can go to the parking deck.
Okay,
But the CSSD 1 and 2 aren't from property tax.
CSSD2 is, but CSSD1 is not. You're correct. That is, the CSSD1 is $3 room night. CSSD2 is property tax driven. But just for the district.
But in the district,
In the district, yes.
And only
and
from,
it's businesses.
and only
not
businesses.
residential.
Correct,
Right.
yes.
So it's not our constituents'
not
property
residents,
tax.
it's commercial,
Well,
correct.
some of the owners are constituents.
I'm, that's up to
Yeah, I'm
you
not-
to get into
yeah,
that.
No, that's,
All right. Parking deck fund, I want to touch on that briefly. As you know, we changed the operations of how we can run the parking deck. We had some good numbers already through June. Just to kind of give you an idea, I know it's not budget related, but I figured it's a good opportunity to give you an update. June of last year, we were at roughly 30,000 net income. June of this year, we're at 60,000 net income. So just kind of put that in perspective. But
Well,
with that being said,
I know we'll do well in July because they took my $10 on the 4th of July.
excellent.
They wouldn't let me use my card. That laws is, they're hard business people.
Okay.
No, they had two people right there
So-
taking my money.
We still have a subsidy for the parking deck, but that is the employees' portion, because we had talked about initially going to 40, and we decided that the chairman committed to keeping that flat. So that's roughly went from 300,000+ to 116,000. Now, we will not send that if we do not need to, meaning if we generated sufficient dollars to come from, public parking and the employees combined, then we wouldn't have to send those additional dollars over.
And putting it in parentheses, employee. I mean,
Employee,
So they
yes.
understand where that money's, why we have
Absolutely.
a budget there.
Okay. And then I want to touch on the Streetlight District Fund. If you remember, we reduced the rates and gave a holiday on the Streetlight District a few years ago. The plan is to bring down this fund balance, which is why we have a fund balance appropriation, because we committed to the residents that we would bring that down to the levels that we thought were appropriate and reduce the fee, which we have. And we're going to continue to eat into fund balance a little bit slowly over a period of time to bring that fund balance down to where we want it to be. So that's just kind of give you an idea. That one is a planned fund balance appropriation, and that is not a negative impact. And then, sorry, I am jumping around a little bit. I wanted to go back up to the debt service fund. The only bonds that we have outstanding that this fund pays for is the latest Parks bond fund that we have, or the Parks bonds that we issued. So
And we will pay that off sooner than we thought, right?
we will. If we follow the schedule, you paid off in 2024, I believe. We are projecting that by the end of 2021 to 2022, we will have sufficient funds to pay that off. And then at that time, the board will have to make a decision on the millage rate, because legally, we cannot collect funds for the debt service fund when we don't have a shortfall between the cash we have on hand and the bonds that are outstanding. So that'll be a decision that will have to be made probably in 2022 of what to do with that millage rate and so on. Okay. All right, any questions on any funds I kind of skipped over? The ones I skipped over try to be were relatively flat, that didn't have a major impact. All right, these are our business type funds. So we have our golf course funds. What we did is we took a look at that, and we made some adjustments to theirs based on talking with their management team, actually reduced their budget a little bit. But again, this is a self-supporting fund, as is all of these with the exception of solid waste and transit. These do receive general fund subsidies. The solid waste, if you remember, we privatized the solid waste, so we are very limited on revenue. So most of what we do here is related to post-closure landfill care. And then we have our transit fund, which is transit throughout the county and does receive a general fund subsidy. Water is a self-sustaining fund. We did get news today that we had as you know, we have on the agenda for tomorrow a refinancing for the water bonds to look to save some money for water. We got some good news on the ratings for the water. We got our first one back, which was AAA, so we'll continue to look forward to those coming forward. And we'll keep the board updated as we move forward. So we get a GO rating, which is AAA, and we also get a water rating. So they're separate ratings, but both have been rated AAA, so we're very proud of that. Okay, and then these are some of our capital budgets. So we looked at this a little bit differently. I will want to touch base on the stadium capital maintenance. You see $2.5 million. The county is only responsible for half of that. Okay, this is a shared cost with the Braves. So they pay in half of the 2.5 every year, and we pay in half of the 2.5 every year, and it goes into a trust. And the money cannot be used unless all three parties, the county, the Braves, and the Gallery Authority, sign off on it. So the idea is that with the stadium, there'll be capital maintenance requirements at the end of the life. So we're paying in over the schedule of the 30-year schedule, just like the bonds, to put that money in there, so that way when the stadium does need to be maintained, all three parties sign off, and these funds can be used versus coming out of pocket or have a large expense. So that's what these are going to be in there for. And then one of the areas that we do overlook a lot of times is when we talk about capital projects. We talked about a lot of those transfers out of the general fund. A lot of other funds have transfers out. They go into this capital projects funds. These are non-SPLOST capital projects that are projects that span over multiple years. So this is another way we fund capital, but it is, as you can see, it's not a lot. You're looking at $12 million for a county of our size that are strictly non-SPLOST, but we are looking to improve on that by the undesignated capital that we have within the general fund. And then the last two here are both water capital projects funds, and these are funded on an ongoing basis through the fees collected there, as well as we have some debt outstanding that we're used to fund some of these. We have no future plans to issue debt, but we're in good shape. Steve McCullers was very good in his meetings or his calls with the rating agencies, talking about his long-term plan for funding those. And again, it did not involve debt issuance at this time. So with that, that hits all of our slides here. So, and then we are going to be doing a very similar presentation tomorrow morning to kick off the public hearing. We'll go through the public hearing process, and then we probably won't have another presentation until the end, and that will be at the board's discretion when we do the adoption. Any questions?
Questions from the board?
Will you send us this?
Absolutely, happy to. And then if you have any specific requests after seeing this and seeing the more detailed version, please send them to us, and we'll be happy to get you answers back. And if we need to add something to the presentation because it's a question that maybe we didn't touch on today, but you felt like it'd be helpful for the public to hear, we're happy to do that as well.
Commissioner Gamble?
When will we be seeing the more detailed version?
You'll have it this afternoon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Cupid?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.